Thank you very much. So it's a bit of a misnomer, the title. There is not a blockchain. There's many different types of blockchains, and Bitcoin has got one of them. So on the audience, who here has ever bought or sold Bitcoin? Let's see the hands. Okay, there's about 1/5. How about Ethereum? Has anyone bought or sold an Ethereum or done a smart contract? It's like 2 people, 1 or 2. Okay. So it's a very big topic. So what I've done is I've done this presentation at a couple law firms, Bennett Jones, and I've done it for banks. And what I tried to do is I've taken some of the stuff and we're going to talk a little bit about businessy stuff and then try and merge in some Python stuff. And my goal for you guys after you leave here is that you'll know enough that you can go and find something. If you've got a project or something like that, you could pick a blockchain to use for your next project. So that's really the goal here. I'm not going to go into smart contracts because we could just spend a day just talking about smart contracts. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story on how I picked which blockchain to use for a project that I worked on. So my first Bitcoin I bought was, I read about it on Slashdot around 2010-ish. There was no way you could buy them. You either had to have a mining rig and you'd make them on your computer, or I found a guy in BC, which I took like $10 and I put it in an envelope and I mailed it to BC, and then magically a week later I got some Bitcoins that arrived on my computer. So that was my first Bitcoin experience, and I thought nothing of it. This thing is ridiculous. No one's going to ever use it, and I kind of forgot about it for a few years. So wind forward a few years, and I started reading things in the news, like, oh, Bill Gates, Bitcoin is a techno tour de force. Creator of Gmail, Bitcoin might be the TCP of money. Even the chairman of the Federal Reserve said that virtual currencies may have long-term promise. And finally, my favorite was an economist who won the Nobel Prize. He said, Bitcoin's evil. That one's the best. In Canada, the Senate did a subcommittee and actually did some analysis on Bitcoin. And I'm starting with Bitcoin here because it's really the original blockchain. When you think about blockchain, you got to understand Bitcoin because that's where it all kind of came from. So once you understand Bitcoin, then you can understand everything else that's happening in the environment. So Senate Subcommittee had a report in 2015, and they said that what is Bitcoin? It's a form of money, and it's a commodity, and it's a payment system all in one, sort of combined. They recommended light touch regulation. So actually in Canada, we're, compared to Europe or lots of other places, we're actually much more progressive. You can use Bitcoin ATMs here that are fairly unregulated. And they're using existing AML laws, meaning that they have to check your ID or your name against some terrorist blacklist. And I'm going to talk a little bit about stocks and blockchains. Security laws in Canada are regulated on the provincial level. That's no change there. So the Winklevoss brothers are these 2 guys. I don't know if you saw on Facebook. They were like these evil twins in the Facebook movie. They have a Bitcoin ETF that they're launching. It's at the SEC level right now. It should be launched early next year. And this is a slide from them. And I like this one because it kind of relates to something that I know, which is gold. I've got a gold ring. So I feel like I can understand gold. So how is Bitcoin, if you think about it again on the business level, how does it relate to gold? Well, it's actually just like gold, except for it's easier to send it. And if I wanted to send you my ring, I have to go and physically give it to you. Bitcoin, I can send it to you on my cell phone. So, I mean, from my perspective, I like to think of Bitcoin as sort of an e-gold kind of thing. And then what is a blockchain? So Bitcoin is made up of this database, which is a blockchain, and it's got certain characteristics. And these are a couple that came to mind. One is that it's immutable, which means you can't really change it. It's sort of a write-only log. So if I send you a Bitcoin, after 10 minutes, it's there forever, as long as Bitcoin is in existence. It will be only append-only, unless the whole world gets destroyed. But it's basically an append-only log. It's distributed, so it's on about 40,000 computers right now. So that Bitcoin, then when I send it to you to buy a cup of coffee, actually gets distributed all over the world, mostly to China. It's got a level of trust associated with it. In Bitcoin, they call it trustless. So I can send you a Bitcoin, and I don't even have to know you. And so that's why it kind of got popular in terms of the Silk Road, because it was great for doing basically drug transactions. And that's sort of how I got started. One thing people don't talk about, it's got a standardized API, which in the world of instant messaging, where everyone's got their own API, it's got one API that everyone has to use. It's got a single view of reality. A couple of people will say that that's what a blockchain is. I question that mostly because there's these new blockchains which are zero knowledge. And so I could send you a Bitcoin, but no one could know about it. So that's questionable. But generally, it's one way of looking at a database. Here's what a blockchain kind of looks like. Another question. Who here knows hashes? That should be most people. Okay, yeah, that's what I figure. So basically, each one of these blocks comes out every 10 minutes. So Bitcoin it's a 10-minute block cycle. And there's these computers all over the world, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but basically every 10 minutes a block gets written, and in that block it's got all the transactions from that 10 minutes plus a header, and the header's got a SHA hash, which is called a Merkle root, of all the transactions in there, and then it refers to the last 10-minute block. So it's basically to do a block validation, you can just go across the headers, and if you validate the headers, generally it's going to be okay. If you want to play with Merkle roots, there's a nice Python library at the bottom there to figure out how it works. Okay, and sometimes people you might hear in the news smart contracts, and you might have heard of this thing called the DAO. Nick Szabo is a really, really smart guy. He's been writing since the early 90s about smart contracts, and I took a quote from him because I thought it was really good. He says the basic idea of a smart contract is that many types of contractual clauses can be embedded in hardware or software in such a way to make breach of contract expensive, and if desired so, prohibitively so. So he comes up with an example of a gumball machine. So a gumball machine he considers a smart contract. So you put in a quarter, and you've got a contract essentially to get some gum that comes out the other side. So when you think about smart contracts, it's basically something where you're providing some value and you're getting something in return, and it's basically automated. But everyone heard about the DAO, and this is a favorite XKCD thing of mine where, there's a car, a smart self-driving car, and the guy takes the rock, sticks it in the front seat, and the car drives off. That's a little bit what happened with the DAO. There's unforeseen things with smart contracts. I think we're still kind of figuring out as a society where a smart contract is part law, it's part programming, and there's lots of unforeseen circumstances that can cause it to go kind of array. So if you heard about the DAO, which was started by a couple, I call them kids, like 22, 21-year-old guys who wrote this contract that put it out in the wild, and you could send some coins to that contract, which was sitting on the blockchain. They raised over $70 million US, which then got stolen. Again, unforeseen circumstances. So now I've talked a little bit about Bitcoin, really high-level look at what a blockchain is. Again, it's a database. For my project, I was looking at there's like 800 of these different coins around. And so you go to this thing called CoinMarketCap. You look at them all and you go, oh my God, where do I start? There's like so many of these coins that are available, and which one should I be using for my project? So I'm hoping by the end of this, we're going to look at 3, and you can make a decision if any of these are good for your project. Okay, this is the process I went through. So let's start with the need. My need in my use case for the users were remittance, which is sending money from Canada or from Europe to mostly Africa, India, all over the world. Our correspondent banking system, I've been working banking with IT for more than 15 years, and it really is awful. Swift messaging, just like, shoot me now. It's a horrible system. A friend of mine at TD said internally to them, each message cost them about $5 Canadian. That's TD's cost to send a message on this basically MQ series queuing system and send it to the correspondent banking. And each bank in the middle takes another $5 to $10. So that's why it costs $30 to send $100. That's why 30% of the money is gone. It's because we've built this correspondent banking system, which is, it's not distributed. So here's the use case that we're trying to find. And the question is, would Bitcoin be the one, or is there another one that we should look at? And a lot of these people have got cell phones. They don't necessarily have a smartphone. For them, maybe average salary is about $5 to $10 a day. So transaction fees are fairly a big thing. So here are the three blockchains I started looking at. And I apologize for so much information on one slide, but there's lots of information to look at. So Bitcoin's the original one that started in 2009, as I mentioned. There will be a maximum about 21 million coins. We're at about 16 million now. It's got that thing that I mentioned, it's like a proof of work. I'm not going to go into how proof of work works, but that's what the mining is. Basically, the miners, when you hear about miners, they're basically validating the transactions, and they're getting a reward to do so. And they're adding each 10 minutes additional block of all the transactions that happened in the last 10 minutes. The core is written in C++. There's lots of GUIs. If you're interested in the underlying thing, it's a level DB database underneath everything. You can actually go and query the database directly. Ethereum was actually started by a guy from Toronto. He's went to University of Waterloo, dropped out his second year because he got so into Bitcoin, and then launched it. I was there roughly at the launch, and it was like last year. The price immediately went up. It's got this proof of work thing where it's, again, it's a 15-second block time, so it's a lot faster. It's a lot more user-friendly. He said that it should be like a browser. He sort of thought as the payment system is like a browser. And so there's two things that he did that are kind of interesting. One is there's multiple versions of the command line interface. One's written in Go. It's called Geth. There's another one that seems to have taken off. It's called Parity. It's written in Rust. He wrote the actual Python command line tool, and it works pretty well. It's not really used too much because it's a bit slow, but it's great for experimenting and learning the system. The final one I looked at was this one called Stellar. Stellar was this guy from Jed McCabe. He had started Mt. Gox, which I think everyone heard of blowing up. He had sold it. He started Ripple, which is, it's a for-profit company that's got a blockchain. It's kind of sold to me because he was they're kind of targeting remittance. It's the same sort of business that we were trying to launch. A guy, David Mendez, created the consensus protocol. He's a professor at Stanford University. So he's got some nice smart guys behind the consensus mechanism. It's not trustless. There's some trust built in. So one of the advantages of having a somewhat trustful system is that you can speed up the block times, and it'll go a lot faster if you've got some bit of a trust versus trustless. Underneath the database, underneath the underlying database is PostgreSQL, which kind of I liked as well. You can query it. And then what they've done, which is quite smart, is they take transactions, instead of stuffing all transactions that have ever happened as one append-only database, they basically take them out and put them in these files called XDR files, which is, if anyone's heard of it, it was created by Sun Microsystems in 1995. And it's a standard, actually, it's an IETF standard for data format storage. It's about 5 seconds block settlement, as I mentioned. So Bitcoin, here's a little bit about the business stuff. Bitcoin's worth now about 11 billion. The price is about 950 Canadian. So not that really matters, but the interesting thing for me is what is the cost of a per transaction. So again, for us, 10 cents, 20 cents is not a huge cost per transaction, but we're talking about people in developing countries. And if you're making $5 a day, 11 cents on a transaction is a little bit on the high side. So it's great as a replacement, potentially for correspondent banking, but not for microtransactions. There's lots of discussion on scalability again because it's one database, and so every transaction ever done gets appended to the database. So there's issues around scalability. It's close to 100 gigabytes, the database now. And I'm going to talk about some of the other things. Then there's Ethereum, the other one we looked at. I met some guys in Taiwan. They've actually hacked Ethereum to use it for interbank settlement. They got the settlement down to 3 seconds, which is pretty neat, but wasn't too useful for us, again, because they had their own version of Ethereum, which is separate from the public one. And one of the things we wanted to look at was a public blockchain. Costs about 5 cents to send funds in terms of Ethereum. And it's got this built-in smart contract programming interface, which I actually highly recommend if you're interested in blockchains, if you're interested in smart contracts, go check this out. It's really cool, but it wasn't useful for our use case. Stellar transactions. So you can do about 1 million transactions for about 2 cents. So this is like levels of, it's way cheaper. There is some cost for new accounts. It's about, whereas Bitcoin is free, so it costs about 15 Stellar, which is about 5 or 10 cents to set up a new user account. It's got a built-in exchange. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Actually, I'll talk about it after. So Bitcoin, if you wanted to go and build something in Bitcoin in Python, what would you use? So I mean, I played with a few of the libraries. There's a whole bunch of actually really nice Python libraries. Richard Kiss is a guy from Vancouver. He lives now in Las Vegas. He wrote probably the most used Python library, which is called PyCoin. It doesn't take you back from a lot of the weird things that happen in Bitcoin. Like you can still have malleability attacks, which are basically someone could steal your Bitcoin. So you have to use it with, be careful with it. 21.co is a company, a startup out of New York that raised I think about 130 million. It's basically using Bitcoin for Internet of Things. They've got a great library. Highly recommend it, really easy to use. You probably can get started in about 5 minutes sending Bitcoin. And then if you don't want to do Bitcoin on your own machine, but you want to use a web service, blockchain.info's got a Python library. BitGo is another one, and Coinbase is all written in Python. Actually, I played with their API. It was one of the best as well. So if you're going to write something in Bitcoin, I would either go to 21.co or one of these web services if I was going to do it. Ethereum, it's basically when you talk to Ethereum, you're using an RPC or an IPC interface. PyEth is a nice interface library to that. And I got a typo there, but a Serpent is a way of doing smart contracts in Python, and you can compile them down and you can actually insert them into Ethereum. Solidity is what 97% of anyone's using, and it's kind of a JavaScript-y type of programming language. That's how most of the people are writing smart contracts. Stellar, it's got this library, Stellar base, I stuck up on PyPy. It's got a fairly simple interface for doing these XDR files and then submitting it through a web interface. And so here's the one thing that really kind of set me off Bitcoin, and I'll say it on camera. It was the environmental question. Most of our users are, for this project, will be in Europe, particularly in Germany. This is a room in China. There's probably 100 rooms like this of server of ASIC machines, and they're burning coal energy. So, you know, when we say that it's distributed, there's a huge, fairly bad environmental impact in Bitcoin. And for me, that was one of the things I kind of wanted to take it off the table. Stellar doesn't have any of those issues. So we decided on stellar.org. Takes about 3 seconds to settle. So has anyone here used a Bitcoin ATM before? One or two people. So have you ever sold Bitcoin to the ATM? No. So if there's one in the Deloitte building, which is not too far from here, they put a nice big Bitcoin ATM right in the building. If you try and sell, if you want to cash out, you want cash to buy a coffee or something like that, you go there and you put the Bitcoin on, and then it says, okay, come back in 20 minutes, and you can get your cash. So they send you a text message on your cell phone, and you go, okay, I can go get my money now. So Bitcoin is a little bit broken on the 10-minute block time is a little bit too long for what people expect. Stellar's around 3 seconds, 2 to 3 seconds. So you can theory, it's kind of equivalent of what you think with a credit card. It's got a built-in central limit order book. What does that mean? A stock market's got a central limit order book of buys and sells. So anyone on Stellar, can buy and sell Stellar against anybody else. So we can issue an asset, and I'm going to hopefully show you in 2 seconds. How am I doing for time, by the way? Got 10 minutes, roughly? Okay. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to show you a quick demo of Stellar. It scales way better because all the transactions, the database is about 2 gig. So the only thing you're keeping in there is account levels. And all the actual transaction history is in these XDR files, which are moved off to the file system. It's got a nice clean API. It's got a not-for-profit mission on helping people in developing countries. And just as a caveat, some of the issues that I mentioned with Bitcoin could be fixed with this new Lightning Network, but it's not there yet. So let me do my demo, if I can get it working. Oh, there it is. The joys of Ubuntu. Yeah, this is not moving over. Yeah, I tried earlier. Apologies. Okay. Oh, there, okay. I got something here. That's a new tab. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, okay. I just got it showing. Come on. Okay. So, these are some libraries that you'd have to import. It's Stellar based. Again, it's available on PyPy. The first little thing I do here is I generate a new account. I generate actually 2 accounts here. And this is what, if you want to look at what an account looks like, there's always 2 bits of information associated with every account. You've got a private key and a public key. The public key is what you share with everybody else. It's sort of like your internet email address or something you'd share. Your private key, you think about it as sort of like your password to your email account. So if you think about it as 2 bits of information, your private key you would never share with anybody else, and your public key you would share. So I'm not going to run it because that would just be too risky. So the second thing I do here on line 14 is we're basically creating an account from my second account. And we're submitting this transaction. And once you've done that, so you think about you've got in Bitcoin, there's this concept of cold wallets and hot wallets. Your cold wallet you keep offline because someone can steal your money from you. Your hot wallet is online. So what you do is when you're dealing with cryptocurrency, normally you always want to break all your funds into something that someone could hack into and take, and the stuff that can be not hacked into. And often you'll keep that on a laptop, which is not even connected to your network. You've probably heard of all these Bitfinex or all these hacks. It's mostly because keeping those keys private is incredibly hard. So that's why right here we're creating a secondary account. And the stuff coming back is just this is the XDR. That's actually what an XDR file looks like in ASCII. And then in this number 15, what I'm doing is I'm actually creating a Canadian dollar, and I'm creating 10 Canadian dollars, and I'm putting it in that person's account. So this is an asset in the concept of creating assets. You could create any kind. You could create an ETF. So if you think about Stellar, think about future. You want to keep your money in Google stock because you think Google's great, but you want to buy a coffee. What do you do now? I go to my website, I got to sell this account, I got to wire it to this other account. I need to then, maybe a week later, I can have the money to buy the coffee. With Stellar, you could create a Google stock here, and I could go, in that 5-second cycle, it'll sell it. You could sell the stock and settle the stock all in that 3 seconds. So you could create a CAD, you could buy something USD. So basically, I could sell this CAD, and I could cycle out to USD in a 3-second cycle and settle it. And it's an open distributed ledger, meaning that anyone can read and write from this central limit order book of bids and offers. I'm not going to go too much in detail, but when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, my mind's blown. So here's creating the account. This is down here at the bottom, number 27. I'm actually creating order in an order book. So think about stocks when you buy or sell. These are passive orders. You send in orders. It's got a built-in distributed order book. So as soon as I post my offer, anyone who's on the Stellar network could actually buy or sell from me. So it's a distributed exchange as well as a blockchain. And this is just a list of, just to show you that I got, this is me pulling in the list of orders. Again, it's JSON, it's fairly easy to parse. Here's, at the end here, I'm just checking the balance of the account. So you can see that it's got 5 now Canadian dollars that I've now, and I've got, I sent myself 100 of the lumens, which is the built-in currency in Stellar. So, I just want to talk about one more thing. So Stellar.org's got and this is a pitch to anyone who's interested in developing a distributed app. They've got because it's not for profit, they've got a quarterly award for anyone who wants to develop an app, an open source app. You can get about $3,000 to $5,000, and the next award is in January. If you just make a mock-up app and submit it, you'll get 250,000 lumens, which is about $1,000. If you want to buy Stellars, there's a bunch of exchanges. And I just had one last thing that I wanted to mention. Again, this is thinking about you making your own app. There's 2 things you really have to be concerned about that's probably different from any other app that you've made. First off, you're dealing with money. So are you okay managing money that anyone could take on the internet? So you got to think about that. Monitor your server for regular transactions. And the last thing is, if you're the one managing these keys, the regulator can come and knock on your door and ask to see that you're doing everything properly. So, like I know a couple guys in Toronto made a wallet using Richard Kiss's library. It's a great CryptoKit, it's a great wallet, but they decided to shut it down because the FBI came knocking on their door. And so you guys are actually in the money transfer business, and please show us all your client records. So be ready, if you're going to handle client funds, the government may consider it that you're actually doing banking style. If you're just selling something for Bitcoin, I think you're fine. It's more that if you're doing a wallet or you're doing money transfer. And the company that I'm working with has got a license for that. So the last thing I would say is, are you willing to manage the keys? If not, try and think about using a web service, because managing keys is fairly complicated. And as soon as you lose a client's keys, you could lose all their money. So it's something you really have to be concerned about. So just as a summary, I hope we did a quick overview of blockchains and smart contracts. We looked at 3 of the popular blockchains, and we had a quick look at Stellar. And again, if anyone needs any Stellar coming, I can send you some. If you want to build something, download the library, email me, I'll send you some Stellars. You can develop an app. You could create your own trading bot. I mean, we're looking for people to make trading bots, to do market making in CAD against lumens or euros against lumens, or we got Nigeria is up and running in 2 weeks. There's someone in China who's going to be doing market making for the distributed ledger for that. Well, thank you.